Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's second webinar by Pulse Market. My name is Andy Barry, and I'm the CRO of Pulse Market. Pulse Market is a software engineering firm that has built a sustainability platform that enables companies to capture, manage, and report their CSRD journey, including having the facility to go down the supply chain to enable you to capture data from people who supply you materials or services. Today, I'm delighted to be able to introduce two of my colleagues who will talk to you about CSRD and indeed the platform itself. So Mark Kane is the CEO from Sustainbl-IT, and Sarah Shannon is the head of marketing for Pulse Market. I'd like to hand you over now to Mark, who will talk you through the subject.
Thanks very much, Andy. So welcome, everybody. What I'm going to talk about is accelerating sustainability through technology. My background, I was in technology for the last 30 odd years. I spent about 13 years in renewables, and really sort of did a lot in terms of leveraging technology for those outcomes. Implemented a program called Sustainable Digital Transformation, and now I'm bringing essentially sort of the value of technology to help with sustainability outcomes. And we deliberately are very provocative with our tagline, "Switch on sustainability," because as anybody in sustainability knows, it's not an easy thing, but there are many things that you can do to accelerate that and to make large leaps forward. So, going to start with a timely phrase, both timely in terms of what's happened in the last week. Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And those of us working in sustainability are used to having to deal with that, with those type of challenges. One that's very timely, COP29 opened, and the host in Azerbaijan comes out with the phrase that oil and gas are a gift from God. And this is at the conference where we're trying to agree to reduce emissions, to limit emissions, to try and stay well below 2 degrees of warming. So we're in sustainability, we're used to that. So it's all about what do we do. One of the reasons I put this up is because people ask, particularly in Ireland, and I think a lot of our audience today are dialing in from Ireland, is what does it matter what we do on climate action? We talk about sort of the responsibilities of the large emitters, the US, China, and others. Well, I'm going to focus on why it's important to us as organizations and as a country. There's very concrete reasons why we need to double down and to accelerate on our sustainability efforts. And I'll talk about what I've just put together, just to try and for people to sort of list them off easily, is the 6 C's: cost savings, competitive advantage, cost of credit for your customers and your colleagues or employees, compliance. As the famous phrase goes, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. And then also climate action, and why climate action is particularly pertinent for us in Ireland. So the first one, cost savings, is a very obvious one. If you can take cost out of your business, you're improving your bottom line. You're becoming a more sustainable business by default, because you're not a sustainable business unless you have a positive cash flow. And while we're here at stages like COP29 talking about carbon capture, industrial carbon capture, green hydrogen, and lots of high-end technologies, and they get a lot of attention. There's some very simple things that we should be looking at, like energy efficiency is a huge one. In terms of the cheapest energy is the one you don't use at all. So we should be making far more of an effort in terms of our energy efficiency with regard to our buildings, and also with regard to microgeneration. And we're seeing it here already. A lot of organizations embracing solar PV. And the return on investment on that is just phenomenal now. It's kept coming down from double-digit years down to 5 years. We have one example with a partner of ours where they implemented, and the savings for the company are 60,000 euros per annum for an outlay of 120,000. That's a 2-year return on their investment, and they're going to save 60,000 every year thereafter just from deploying solar PV in cloudy, rainy Ireland. So that's the first one. The second one is competitive advantage. And this is something that we're seeing across all tenders now, both public sector tenders and private sector tenders, is that sustainability is not just a case of ticking the box, do you have a sustainability strategy or do you have a statement? It's about what are your decarbonisation targets? Are you aligned to science-based targets initiatives? What are your actual emissions? What are you doing in terms of social sustainability? Your gender pay gap. The large customers are flexing their muscles and asking their suppliers for this information, and it's particularly pertinent when we get on to talk about CSRD shortly, is why this is the case. CSRD, while it's something for larger companies above a certain size coming in currently, the reach of it is far beyond that into SMEs, into the suppliers of these organizations. Another one is cost of credit. We'd be familiar from our own banks in terms of mortgages that they're offering lower interest mortgages for the higher energy rated homes, and that partly because those loans form part of their scope 3 emissions. But the other reason is that an energy efficient home is less stressed by fluctuations in energy prices. If you're not going to have a massive heating bill, then that loan is less likely to be stressed, and therefore it's a lower risk loan. So it's a very pragmatic thing for the banks to do, to offer lower cost of credit. Another one is then our customers, our colleagues, and this is especially pertinent for younger demographics. They are very passionate about the brands that they choose to purchase from and the ones that they don't purchase from. And we've seen, for a number of reasons, including boycotts, against a number of companies. People are voting with their feet. We've seen it in terms of Starbucks fired their CEO because of the sales slump. We've seen in the last week or so a big transition from users going across from X onto Blue Sky. So there are customers are looking to buy from brands that reflect their values, and we have a very passionate young demographic, and that same passionate young demographic that is coming into the workforce, they want to work for organizations with purpose and that organizations that reflect their values. So attracting talent and retaining talent, being environmentally and socially sustainable is imperative to long-term success. Then we come on to compliance. As the phrase goes, if you think that compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. So the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive is now in law, as is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which is something we'll also talk about. What makes this so pertinent, so relevant, is this requires organizations to report on their actual full scope of emissions. They can't just hide behind carbon offsets and net it off against that. So the elements that are really key here is it's including their supply chain emissions. I remember a few years ago that there were a number of organizations proudly stating that they were net zero, including one major retailer in the UK. When we look behind the curtain, they were just talking about their scope 1 and 2 emissions, their direct emissions, whereas in retail, you could talk about 80% plus of their emissions are going to be their scope 3 emissions. Now, the Science Based Targets Initiative, they launched a new global net zero standard just in time for COP27 a couple of years ago. And if you want to truly be net zero, it's according to that global standard. So the great thing about CSRD is there's no hiding anymore. By having to report actual emissions, by all means, companies can buy carbon offsets. That's a whole other webinar that we maybe have another time. But it means that it puts the focus back on decarbonization and not on just accounting for it by buying your way out of trouble. The other element is that companies need to demonstrate how their decarbonization targets from their base year are going to align to the Paris Accord. The best way to do that is to submit to Science Based Targets Initiative for verification. And the other element that is really key here is that the sustainability claims that are made on the report, they have to be independently verified. So that's a way of tackling greenwashing. And the other reason, very important, is climate action. So this is actually just a still from Don't Look Up, which is about a meteor that was heading to Earth, and there was just it was obvious that it was going to hit. Nothing was being done about it. It was being talked about. It was essentially an analogy for what we're doing with climate action. The considered safe scientific limit of parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere is 350. That's where we were just a couple of months ago, 422. So bringing that from a global level down to the Irish level is what does it mean for us? Well, putting it purely in financial terms, we are currently looking at fines of about 8 billion euros for failing to meet our decarbonisation targets by 2030. So isn't it not far better to invest money to decarbonise and make our businesses more competitive and more efficient and not have to pay that at all? Because that 8 billion, that comes from the taxpayer. So let's use it in a better way. So we saw there the tile there for 13 climate action, which is one of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's quite scary to think that these were launched in 2015 with a target of 2030, and we're far closer to 2030 now than we are to 2015. And yet progress against the targets is under serious threat. This was a dashboard from this year in terms of how are we progressing. So that is, to borrow the phrase from a very wise man, Yoda, in a dark place we find ourselves and a little more knowledge lights our way. So what I want to talk about for the rest of this is that the ways in which technology that we already have can help us with sustainability and ways that we can double down and accelerate. Or as as the UN Secretary General said, we need action on all fronts, everything everywhere all at once, but we have to move into warp speed to do so. So with that sort of depressing stat of where we're at, I just maybe talk a little bit more optimistically now. And the first thing, very close to my heart, I spent 13 years in renewables. I worked for the late Dr. Eddie O'Connor, and I remember his evangelizing, many years ago about renewables being the right thing to do and talking holistically about the total costs of energy, including sort of the carbon emissions, including the transport of fuel, trying to convince countries who hadn't yet embraced renewables programs to get started with it. For example, with South Africa, and sort of they've now started to accelerate their program again. Other countries such as Chile, who had no program at that time. And the great thing is that renewables has gone from being the right thing to do ecologically to the right thing to do economically. We're seeing in established countries like the US, a number of years ago, there was one of the large utility providers did a calculation whether it was better to retrofit an old coal-fired plant or to build a new renewables plant. And they worked out that the financials spoke for renewables. So it is now the meeting of the economics and the ecological thing to do. A great stat for those who might say, but China. China installed close to 300 gigawatts of renewables last year. I think they've done that just on solar this year alone. In context, it took the US 40 years to do their first 300. In terms of our typical use in Ireland, it's about 6. So is our typical need. So renewables is growing exponentially, and it is. We've seen now with the UK have shut down their last coal-fired power station. Portugal likewise. So the transition is unstoppable. Another great development is in technology, satellite data and AI. And this technology, Climate Trace, was launched also at COP um, by Al Gore. Many who said the man who should have been president. And what it's doing is it's using data and AI to map emissions worldwide. And you can go onto a climatetrace.org, zoom into the map, have a look. It'll show you everywhere in the world where the largest emitters are. Now, this is a fantastic tool at a planetary level, at a country level, also at an international level, to expose where there's underreporting of emissions, because we've seen plenty of those from some of the fossil fuel rich countries. And this is essentially shining a light onto those and telling us the truth. So I'll come on to one that's in local here in Ireland, and I have a friend who speaks very passionately for data centers and the value that they bring, and I see the value of data centers in terms of what that hosting of technology does in terms of everything that it enables. If you think about the streaming services that we use, we're not physically printing DVDs and putting them in plastic cases anymore. We're just streaming. We're avoiding the generation of this waste in the first place. But one of the things that gets a lot of coverage in Ireland, especially, is how energy hungry the data centers are. There's no debate that they're about that, and that they're going to become more energy hungry with the huge AI models that are having to be serviced. But one of the things that Microsoft did with a data center is, in data centers we have huge rows of uninterruptible power supplies that essentially provides power in the case of an outage. But what they've done in Microsoft, they've worked together with EirGrid, so that when renewables are at their peak and there's still demand, they are releasing back energy from those batteries back to the grid, and they're replenishing them then, during the night when there's plentiful renewable electricity available. So that's a way that they're being a good corporate citizen beyond their own needs in terms of displacing fossil fuels. Now, that's something that we can leverage a lot more of. If you think about, we have tens of thousands, probably well over 100,000 batteries that are sitting on four wheels in many driveways. And one of the areas that we can improve upon is bidirectional charging, so that we can store clean electricity at night on our EVs, and we can use that to feed back to our houses during the day. So these are just intelligent uses of technology to maximize the use of renewables. Another great organization in Ireland is called Energy Cloud, and what they are doing is, again, it's about using otherwise wasted renewable energy from nighttime, which would otherwise have to be curtailed where there's no demand, and the wind turbines would have to be shut down. Is they've installed little devices into energy poor households, and at night, when otherwise this energy would be curtailed, it's flicking a switch and providing a hot water tank and essentially heating the water for these energy poor households. So this is an example of just cleverly using an IoT device and matching supply with demand by driving up demand to meet the supply. We often think of it the other way around. Supply is there to is driving then in terms of making sure that we're meeting demand, but we can ramp up or down demand. Another great organization that won an award recently, Food Cloud. The power of this is essentially the use of mobile app with the location-based element of it. Is there are with the supermarkets, we have a lot of food that is coming close to its expiry date, and otherwise is going to end up in a skip. Perfectly good food. And it's made available at a very low cost for people to buy. So it's the great thing about it is pairing locally with the users to say, here, in your local Lidl, they have these offers on, or there's things that can be collected. And we're avoiding the food waste, we're avoiding that going to landfill, we're avoiding the emissions from that waste. So, and then to come back to what I certainly consider to be good news, there may be quite a number of people might disagree if it's their responsibility to do the reporting for their organization, because it's creating a big administrative effort for them, is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So to repeat, then this is requiring companies to report on their actual emissions. So it puts the focus on decarbonisation rather than offsetting, and in terms of aligning to the Paris Climate Accord. And it's reducing down instances of greenwashing, because it'll have to be independently audited in the same way that the annual financial returns will have to be audited. So will the sustainability report. So one of the things I wanted to flag up is then again the pairing of the challenges of sustainability with the opportunities for technology. And these are some of the things that we identified the Chief Sustainability Officer, or the individual in the organization who is going to be tasked with sustainability. And it may fall under the CFO in some organizations where they don't have a dedicated CSO because of the compliance element of it. One of the areas that in conversations with many CSOs, they always lamented over the years, they say they were not getting a true picture of what's going on. They were sort of waiting on data. They were living in Excel sheets, crunching it, and they were often getting a backward look over the year when they were pulling things together, maybe for their annual submission to Carbon Disclosure Project, or to do their carbon footprinting. And they realized they were spending an awful lot of time doing this administration, waiting, chasing for data, and far less on actually implementing the initiatives that would help decarbonize. So one of their challenges is getting the data and trying to automate that and getting a better real-time picture of it. The next one is in terms of prioritizing the initiatives. There are a lot of things that need to be done. If a company's in scope for CSRD, they have 1,000+ text-based questions that they need to answer in terms of policies and approaches, but they also need to capture their scope 1, 2, and 3, including their supply chain emissions. They need to set decarbonisation targets, and they need to get that verified. The best way being submitting that to Science-Based Targets initiatives. So they have to work with the supply chain. They have to sort of identify where the quick wins, where the bigger challenges, the bigger opportunities, and then they have to do that usually with a limited budget and also limited time, maybe limited resources. And sustainability is a very broad space. So it's a case of in terms of the skills. The other challenge that you have as the sustainability officer is getting alignment with the C-suite. Everybody has their different agendas, and it may be a case of this is the right thing to do, but if that's the core part of the sort of the profitable part of the business, you're going to have a challenge on your hands getting agreement on that. Important is sort of pushing out education to the entire workforce, but also bringing in ideas from the workforce and getting those changes implemented to the business model. So now the interesting thing about this is that these challenges are not new, because for anybody who's worked in as a CIO before, you've actually had similar challenges. So certainly data acquisition, data automation, traceability, dashboards, that's the bread and butter for what you expect from your IT function. In terms of prioritizing initiatives, we've seen it over the last number of years. GDPR being a big one. That was something that would have created a lot of pressure on the IT function in terms of the helping ensure the classification and the system's ability to classify data and to be able to extract data and to be able to identify if there was a data access request or a data deletion request. Again, if you were implementing a digital transformation, you need to get that C-suite aligned. You can't just you can't do a field of dreams when it comes to technology. You can't just build it and they will come. You need to bring everybody on that journey. You need to make sure that everybody's aligned to that. You are trying to change, some business processes there a lot of the time, and a new suite of technologies involves a lot of education. So there's a great alignment in terms of the challenges of one and sort of the skill sets the other brings to that can help. And I was looking for what was the best example of a dynamic duo from the movie world, and this came up as number one, which was Han and Chewie, the CSO and the CIO. I'm not saying which one is which. Essentially, that's the new hope, is getting these two people working very closely together. I think can pay massive dividends for the organization. So on a personnel level, this is where you already have technology helping with sustainability. So I see this as a growth area for the responsibility of the CIO, particularly as we move more and more away from on-premise infrastructure to cloud, and sort of that nuts and bolts of IT is no longer part of the remit. This is then moving more up into sort of a value add for the CIO function. And in terms of just to note, what are some of the things that CIOs may have done without realizing how they had benefited sustainability? So this is something that in some cases pre-pandemic, but certainly this accelerated during the pandemic. We had a massive uptake of remote working. So we saw then Microsoft Teams going from 20 million active users to 200 million active users. We had similar growth levels on Zoom, up to 200 million active users. So video conferencing and sort of working remotely grew exponentially, and we saw post-pandemic that many organizations were looking for a return to office, and they've compromised with hybrid working environments now of a 3-2 or a 2-3. Some have stayed completely remote, others have insisted everybody comes back to the office. But one of the things that remote working did is it was reducing down emissions, in particular scope 3 emissions. So there's a category of scope 3 emissions, category 7, called employee commutes, and essentially it's eliminating that. Any remote work eliminates that commute. We also saw an exponential use of electronic document signatures, like Adobe Sign, like DocuSign. And when we think about avoiding printing, we tend to think of it just in terms of the paper, but there's a huge saving in terms of water as well. There's a saving in terms of trees that are not cut down. There is there's also a saving in terms of waste that's not going for recycling because you're avoiding it in the first place. And you can go on, I think they used to have it front and center on the DocuSign website, but it's there under their sustainability claims. They've estimated water savings of 7 billion gallons. This was a US website, and close to 390 million pounds of avoided waste of paper. And then when we talk about embracing the cloud, we've long moved from a scenario, or I can remember 10 years ago when we started our cloud journey, and we were made to jump through hoops on moving from on-premise to the cloud. And we were asked, is it safe? Well, it's actually the safer place to be now, both in terms of you're piggybacking on the cybersecurity strengths of the cloud providers, but you have that instant scalability for when you need it. You can ramp up, you can ramp back, and you've outsourced the whole refresh cycle. The other thing that's well worth noting is, for a number of years now, the major technology providers are amongst the largest procurers of renewable energy in terms of buying renewable energy plant of all organizations worldwide. So you have commitments. For example, Microsoft have committed to be net zero across all scopes of emissions by 2030. And they've committed further to removing all of their historical emissions by 2050, which is a commitment that goes way beyond what many nation states have done. Similarly, Google have matched on an hour-by-hour basis procurement of renewable energy to match their usage for a number of years now. So these data center providers cloud providers. They are actually sort of leading the way in terms of clean electricity to power their data centers. They are going to face challenges now with the massive growth requirements for energy for AI. We've seen some of them have started with nuclear energy procurement. It's still zero emissions, but it's something that they are they're targeting. We've also seen, for example, with Microsoft, that they have requested a number of their major suppliers to switch to clean electricity, and we've seen it with large organizations like the Danish offshore wind company Ørsted has requires its major suppliers to be procuring from 100% renewable electricity. So we're seeing the influence of large companies down to smaller companies. So those are just some of the examples of what simply in pretty much every organization that they have made positive contributions to sustainability through their technology choices, either consciously or unconsciously. But what we want to get onto is then how do we accelerate that? And that's a view through the Millennium Falcon, in case people are wondering. So we've identified that there are essentially 6 main pillars for a transformation program on sustainability. If you have done nothing on sustainability to date, the starting point is with an initial strategy. You move towards education. There's different levels of education needed for the core team, then for the whole organization. You need to know what your baseline is. You need to capture that data. And if you're a large organization, you need to find a way to automate those feeds. You don't want the CSO working in an Excel file and having to chase people with emails every month to provide data to them. You want to automate that, whether that is through the use of IoT on metering, or whether it's a clever use of analytics on your ERP system and using different categorizations of what the carbon footprint would be. That's another way to do it. Beyond that, you need to have a carbon management solution that'll either be a module within the ERP or it'll be a standalone best of breed solution. That is going to be the system of record for your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. It's going to include your decarbonization targets, your progress against them, and it'll provide you also in terms of the extract to provide to Science Based Targets Initiative to be able to verify that you are aligned. Beyond that, you need a system of record for compliance. For CSRD, you need somewhere to house those 1,100 answers to the questions. And again, an Excel file is not the place to have it, because these questions are going to go all the way across the organization, different functions, whether it's finance, HR, legal, operations. Different areas are going to have to answer different questions, and we're working up to a deadline where companies need to really have got started already. But using a system for that means you're going to know which areas are behind, which areas are done, and be able to slice and dice by function. The other great thing about pulling things into a system is, this is not just for CSRD. Many companies look to get external certifications. So the other element is whether you're doing Carbon Disclosure Project or EcoVadis or B Corp or any of these certifications. Again, these things can be quite an effort to get the information in there. Ideally, you want a system that's going to be able to help you to automate or semi-automate a lot of that heavy lifting. Now, when it comes to a journey like that, I had a look at estimates. Boston Consulting, being a consulting group, estimated that let's say a digital transformation or change transformation program takes maybe 3 to 4 years. They talked about a sustainable transformation journey taking maybe a decade. But the reality is that's if you take it a step-by-step basis. But the reality is, why would you walk when you can run? And why would you run when you can accelerate with a zero emissions vehicle? And that's very much what we are advocating for, is using what's called SaaS 2.0. So SaaS 2.0 is you're using software as a service with inbuilt expert recommendations. So you are automatically benefiting from a body of knowledge from expert consultants in these technologies, whether it's for your initial sustainability strategy, whether it's for setting your decarbonization targets and what you can do. This is not just about having the vehicle, it's about using the force. And that comes to the crux of what we do at Sustainbl-IT. We work with organizations at any stage of their journey, and these are the technologies that we use to help accelerate to get the outcomes that you need. And beyond that, we don't say that you have to start at the beginning and continue all the way to the end. You may, as an organization, you may say you're being pressurized by your largest customer to get a certification, EcoVadis certification. We won't tell you you have to start at the beginning and spend the next 10 years or 3 years to do that. It's perfectly possible to sort of use that exercise as a baselining and gap analysis by doing a baseline certification. And it might come and give you a score and saying that you are, maybe committed or you may be below, but it gives you a start. So we're all about switching on sustainability and getting you going faster. So I just want to take a few minutes to talk about a few of these and a few of these sprints that can be done in as little as 5 days or across 10 days. That's really depending on the availability of the people in the organization to spend the time with us that we need to pull this together. But if I start with what we call our living strategy for sustainability, we're a partner for a technology called Digitopia, which is founded by a couple of Gartner executives, former Gartner executives, who were very much in the world of consulting and realized that there's a better way. And their goal is to democratize consulting. They started with a digital maturity index, and they've leveraged that now for sustainability maturity. So in our sprint, what we do is we run through 6 dimensions of the organization. So 2 of each of them, they relate to the environmental, social, and governance area. So it's a further breakdown of that. But in very plain English, we're asking questions to the relevant participants and saying, where do you see your organization currently? Where do you want to get to within 12 months? So the first thing that does is it's going to give you a benchmark of where are you at against industry? Are you behind? Are you average? Get you a sense of where are you versus your competitors. And beyond that, it generates out your sustainability strategy roadmap, which is going to be sort of complemented by the skill sets that we would bring into it together with the discussions that we'd have there. If you're in line to do CSRD, there's a lot of projects and initiatives that you need to do to make sure that you get that done. So it's about ensuring that you know what is the most urgent, what's the most important, what's the size of the engagement. That's what these bubbles represent, is how large the engagement is. So this is always an interesting one. We presented back in draft mode. This is what we've come up with. And then the conversation with the C-suite happens, where things get moved out and sort of we try and agree on which are the initiatives that realistically are going to be done in the 12-month period. But it is an exercise within the space of a week to 2 weeks that in some cases this could take them about 6 months if they're not using an approach like this. And similarly, with Digitopia, the other arm of this that we have is about doing the exact same for digital maturity, because the way we see it is sustainability is accelerated faster from a firm foundation of a strong digital maturity. So it's something that we measure as well, the digital maturity. In terms of compliance and reporting, Sarah's going to talk about the Pulse platform and what it's doing on CSRD. I want to just draw attention to something that we can do with regard to CSDDD, the Due Diligence Directive. For those of you not familiar with it, this is a fantastic piece of legislation that was brought in on the anniversary of the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh, where hundreds, I think over 400 garment workers died in a building collapse. They were producing garments for European fashion houses, fast fashion houses. So this legislation essentially states that if there is a human rights abuse or environmental abuse anywhere in your supply chain globally, you'll be prosecuted as though that had taken place in the EU. Now, that's jail time for the CEO of a company that's that's buying from a supplier that they haven't not done their due diligence on. So great power of the technology here is to do supply chain discovery and using customized templates to reach out to the supply chain, enable them easily to provide the responses and documentation associated to that. And the powerful thing is then to do automated scoring on that. So it's a very good way to get your supply chain to engage without actually forcing them to spend money on licenses to get certified on a particular external certification. But it's a way for you to sort of get a proper picture of all of your supply chain. So, and then another one that is becoming very popular, also interesting on CSDDD, where very large organizations are pushing smaller organizations to get certified, is on EcoVadis. So for those of you not familiar with EcoVadis, it is the world's largest, most accessible ESG ratings provider. It's different from a lot of the other ratings providers. The origins of many of the other ESG ratings providers is that they had their analysts studying the annual reports and sort of different sort of news articles about listed companies. They would collate based on their internal scoring mechanisms, and they would sell that information to pension funds and to investment funds to provide them that data. EcoVadis is different. It's a software as a service subscription model. Any company, no matter how small or how large, can submit the answers to the EcoVadis questionnaire, across 4 pillars, environment, labor and human rights, ethics and sustainable procurement, provide supporting documentation. The EcoVadis analysts will review that, and they'll come back, first of all, with a score. I'll just go back one slide there. They'll tell you, how did you score on this? But importantly, the other thing that they will do with that is they will issue you out a set of improvement recommendations. So you're benefiting from the subscription in terms of expert recommendations on how can I improve my ethics standing? How can I improve my environmental score? And that's without paying for for a big sort of consulting engagement to do so. So where we help with that is that we're an accredited EcoVadis training and consulting partner. Particularly, we'll help you, at any stage, be it the initial certification, be it in terms of implementation of the improvements that they're looking to do, and also the recertification. So those are the 3 that we have. We have, as I said, we have agile sprints across all of the all of these areas that we can do, and we work very closely with an organization called Agile Executives. That's why we call it Agile, who are the experts at identifying and securing green grants, lean grants, digital grants, either from local enterprise offices or from Enterprise Ireland, that can help you to get either partly or fully funded engagements. So if there's an interest in that, please do reach out. And if you need help with applying for the grants, again, reach out. So the call to action that I have is, for any organization, recognize that technology is a foundation to really help accelerate the sustainability outcomes. The CIO and the CSO, they are potentially the most dynamic duo in the organization. One knows exactly the challenges that the others experience, and I can help with that. So one thing to note about CSRD, if an organization has to report in 2026, it's for 2025 data. So you need to get systems in place for the beginning of 2025. So the time to do that is actually yesterday. Make sure to leverage technology. You do not want to be living in spreadsheets. It's not something that an auditor can come in and that can sign off on. Say, they'll be asking who has access to this, where's the traceability, where's the where's the security on this. You need a system of record. It's worth noting, technology supports you at every stage. It can help you move faster at every stage of the journey, from initial strategy right through to certification. So what I'd say is, in terms of call to action, is have a look back at that. I think we're sharing this deck. Know where you're at, and say, okay, we're there. How can we move faster? There are, as I said, there's grants available, and we're very happy to help you to secure those grants and to help you to accelerate your sustainability journey. So, and with that, I'll hand over to Sarah and Andy.
Thanks, Mark, for that excellent presentation. It's very enlightening. Much appreciated. Sarah, we'll hand over to you to talk through what Pulse can help with in this.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. That was a very informative presentation. I really enjoyed that. Certainly a lot of food for thought with those hard-hitting stats at the beginning, but you brought it up to a positive theme there at the end and inspire us all to take that first step on the journey that we need to take. And yeah, I would appreciate everybody looking to get their lunch soon, so I'll just give you a kind of whistle-stop introduction to Pulse. So yes, we're a sustainability tech platform, and we're here to simplify and manage the monitoring of your sustainability data, ensuring you're capturing it. You can store it once and use it many times. That's our approach, and that makes a big difference for organisations who are looking to respond and support their journey along the compliance journey with regulations and frameworks such as CSRD, SECR, CSDD, and EcoVadis and B Corp. If you could move to the next slide, Mark, that would be helpful. So on Pulse, we have a dedicated module for CSRD. It's been developed in line with and support from our sustainability consultants. And on this module, we are able to simplify the engagement and data capture. We have questionnaires built in line with the SRS framework, and this you can capture the information from within the organisation and across your supply chain, and it supports the double materiality requirements. This, with help from the consultants, you can pull together and visualise all the information you need, identify the information gaps that you have too, and build out a gap analysis and get ready with your sustainability reports that are required for your sustainability audits, which are part of CSRD. So if you could move on to the next slide, thank you. So value chain engagement is key. CSRD is an overwhelming task that no one individual or one organisation can tackle on their own. So on Pulse, we have this value chain engagement module where you build out your questionnaires and you can score the responses. You can compare the responses side by side, see what's coming in, see who hasn't responded as well, and chase them up. This is key for stakeholder engagement, is key within an organisation if you want to respond to CSRD properly. On Pulse, you can have consistent and reliable data captured, but it's also organised and it's ready to be reviewed. If you move on to the next slide, thank you. So, as we've heard from Mark, this is a huge undertaking, and there's a lot involved. There's a long lead time to pull in the information that we're needing. So collaboration is key. I say not one individual can do this. Transparency is also very important, and you need a good audit trail for CSRD. So on Pulse, you're able to have an inline communication tool. So you're able to talk to your colleagues. You can reach out to your all the people in your value chain and gather in information. So this is really important. As Mark said, you don't want to be living in Excel all the time. Instead, you can live in Pulse and you can pull in all that information. There's no more back and forth with email trails as well. It's all auditable. You're able to see who said what and who said what and when. And that's the audit trail that you can provide and back up everything that you've done for your CSRD regulation. Okay, the next slide, please. We're really proud of this feature on Pulse, with a complete suite of integrated charting tools where you can visualize the data any way you choose. You can have pie charts, graphs, and then importantly, you can export that into Excel, but you can also export it into report format to share with your board and your stakeholders, and export it into your sustainability reporting, which is key for your sustainability auditors when they come to review it. So Pulse, it's cost effective and it's time saving. It is eliminating that need for spreadsheets. It's providing that audit trail that's crucial for CSRD. We're working with a wide client base, and we're offering an ecosystem to help them. We've got training, consulting, implementation. This can all be done on the platform, and we've also got all the support of experts like Mark to support you as well. If you can move on to the next slide, and we'll just move on to Q&A, Andy, if you've got any questions.
Yeah. Firstly, thanks, Sarah, for that update. I think the Pulse platform is it's kind of key to it for a lot of companies, so that they can hold their information as you like, cut it once and keep it there, so that you can follow it on year on year. It's also a point worth making is that from an auditor's point of view, the auditors now have a place whereby they can use a portal, go in and analyze the data that companies have submitted. They have submitted it with consultant support, obviously, because it's 1,144 data points. Now, I don't believe 1,144 data points will be required for even any company in the world will be using all of those data points, but there will certainly be hundreds for large companies and substantial amounts for small and medium enterprises as well. So just checking on what questions we have coming in. One here says, what can we do to make all of these rules and principles manageable? Where do we start? It's a good question, maybe, Mark.
Yeah, well, I'm very positive about CSRD as the tide that lifts all boats. It's really sort of leveling the playing field, and it's giving us great transparency. I think that the thing is that knowing what has to be done in sequence, so that having that initial strategy, if you sort of if you're thinking about, we need to get this reporting done. As a former sort of what I call recovering CIO, you would have had scenarios where you'd have a function come to you and they'd say, we need this report tomorrow or next week, and this is something for which maybe the data wasn't even captured or wasn't available. So you're saying, well, the time to ask for that was probably a bit longer ago. So, when you are unclear on what the size of the task is, the best thing is not to sort of procrastinate. Is find out, get the full shock of it, because then you know what has to be done, and then you can start, and it's going to be about identifying, okay, we have to cover scope 1, 2, and 3, and the 15 categories of scope 3. So let's work out what we have. Let's work out what we don't have. Let's identify the gaps and how we're going to close that. Then beyond that, to say, right, we're going to have a baseline there. We're going to have to set decarbonization targets. We're going to have to get them verified. That's another step in the journey. But again, you need to know for your organization, of these 1,100 plus data points, which ones are going to be pertinent to me, and you're going to have to divvy up inside the organization and do that exercise to make sure that the ownership is clear. This is a case. You don't want to be leaving this and say it's just the CSO is responsible for this and they're chasing everybody. There has to be ownership from finance, from HR, from operations, from IT, different ownerships of these different data points, and that sort of subcommittee established that's going to meet regularly. And I always say, do not have regular meetings with PowerPoints, have regular meetings with dashboards, like the dashboard that you showed me there. That's exactly what you should be presenting, and slicing and dicing and say, right, by each area, how have you progressed? And you'll be able to see, 4 of 9, 0 of 9, or whatever it might be. So
I agree exactly with what you're saying, Mark. I know, as like yourself, a recovering COO, some of the COOs in organizations are actually being tasked with this. People are saying it's operational. Others are saying, well, it's compliance. Some are saying we need to hire a chief sustainability officer, and they're running around trying to work out where best to start. Well, the first place to start is the realization, in my head, to realize you cannot do this on the back of an envelope. You can't be seen to just do this. That won't work either. And when you go to operational heads, they will say, where do people hide? Not enough time, not enough money. Well, first and foremost, the time is up front. You start by saying exactly what you said. What do we need to do? Who can come in and tell us? And then what is the solution for us to be able to do this in a comprehensive, but I don't want to use the word easy, but a more, to excuse the pun, a sustainable way. So that is to use technology to be able to store the information. And as you said, what you showed there, Sarah, which I think is excellent, is the dashboard. If I'm, as an ex-COO, walking into a board meeting with a dashboard showing progression, I'm already walking in very tall because I can demonstrate progress. Thanks for that, Mark. Another question coming in is, what role is technology going to have in this? Well, I think what we've just said there is important, bearing in mind the data-heavy nature of CSRD. Well, from that point of view, just to me to start it before I hand over to Mark, is heavy lifting requires technology. If you're looking at 1,144 data points, you need a platform that gathers that information, aligns the information to the data points, goes down the value chain, asking the questions that you need answered to fill out those data points in more substantial way. In other words, my carbon footprint is not 8, it's actually 12, because 4 of those carbon footprints are being used to supply me with materials or services. So you need, and that's where technology will play a big role.
I'd also add to that, Andy, is AI has a big role to play there. If I think about, we think about AI, many people think about ChatGPT, which is pointing outwardly at the internet. But I think for this, of more interest is things like Copilot that are pointing inside at the organization and looking at the sort of all of the policies and procedures and sort of knowledge base of the organization. And that can accelerate it to give you that sort of 80% start to the answer to a question. If instead of starting with a blank page, it's generating that draft. The important thing that we say with AI is you always want to have the human approval of it, to ensure that you've avoided what are called hallucinations, because that is something that AI can do. It can create something that's not true, but it is a great accelerator.
Absolutely. Another question here is that, I'm just reading it out here, CSRD is far-reaching, and it also applies to 26 countries that are unique and very independent in how they make and interpret laws. Are we likely to see some teething issues in the directive as it becomes less of a one-size-fits-all model? Well, again, to start that, answering that before I hand to Mark, yes, of course, we are going to see teething issues. Yes, of course, we're going to see different interpretations. But it's like every law that comes in. I was involved with AML, which was anti-money laundering procedures. When they came in first, it was, you need all this information. But eventually, it went on to settle as to what is acceptable to be compliant. You also, in that case, the last thing you want to be is on spreadsheets. The last place when things change, oh, we don't need that anymore. That's not as relevant as it was. To be going in and adjusting spreadsheets, to be adjusting information that you've already stored and captured is a much easier place to live.
Yeah, certainly we've already seen as it's been transposed into Irish law. I think as it initially was transposed, instead of it saying in scope now or the 250 and above, it was saying all listed companies. So I think that there's something being worked out there just to correct that. But every country has different has set, particularly around decarbonisation, different priorities across different sectors. We know here there's a lot of debate about which sectors are going to decarbonise more or decarbonise less. We have a very, very strong agricultural base here, and that's maybe there's less decarbonisation happening there. But I like to see CSRD from the positive. I look at sort of the collating of all of this data up at the European level and delivering great insights in terms of the performance that we're actually getting. So I see, yes, there'll be teething issues, but I see that sort of the once we've overcome that first year of reporting and we start leveraging technology to help automate this more, I see that this is going to provide invaluable information to policymakers in Europe.
Great. Just a small couple more questions. What would you say are the key considerations that boards of directors need to consider when they're considering CSRD?
Well, understand the size of it. Understand the maybe the first question they'll ask is why do we have to do it? And always get somebody with a telling reason why they should. If you're not compliant with CSRD, there's fines. You may be excluded from public tenders, and you may, CEO may go to jail. So that's usually good enough reasons for them to sort of pay attention. That's the punch in the face. To get their attention. And beyond that, it's about really just knowing that the size of the effort involved. When it comes to emissions reporting, scope 1 and 2, relatively straightforward. Scope 3, that's collaboration with the supply chain. It's a lot of data involved in that, and time involved, and chasing involved, and that's where technology is needed. But beyond that, it's about submit for SBTI, Science Based Targets Initiative verification is the best way to provide evidence that you are aligned to the Paris Accord, and that's a lengthy process from submission to actually getting that back, and then it's about ensuring that there's honest conversations about where the ownership of each of those 1,100 plus data points are, or the subset of them in the organization. So there's not just one fall guy or fall girl that is the CSO. This is a company-wide effort.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point when you say company-wide effort. I know if I was walking into the boardroom as the COO, I would be saying to the CFO, you do know your annual accounts are not complete without a sustainability report attached. That focuses the mind, because if it's not attached, non-completion of financial reporting, that's the level of seriousness of it. So last question for the moment is, what can we expect from CSRD in 10 years? And how common an issue will it be in an average boardroom?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I don't have I don't have that view of the future. I think certainly it will have bedded in. I think that it'll have expanded from these larger organizations down to sort of much smaller organizations, and it'll probably be a sort of as we do today. We look for sort of external certifications in terms of doing business with companies. We'll be looking to see the CSRD compliance of any organization that we work with. So I see it's going to be absolutely ubiquitous. I see that there will be solutions implemented there to make it simpler for these smaller organizations. I say that the technology has a massive role to play in terms of automating all of the data feeds and sort of pulling this together and sharing that information. So I say we have teething pains over the next year or two to go through. By the time all the SMEs are brought in, I think it's going to become a much easier thing, and it'll become just as we do with sort of our year ends, our month ends, we'll be sort of making sure that we have got our CSRD data up to date every month.
That's great. Listen, in the interest of making sure people get out for their lunch, thank you very much, Mark. Very much appreciated. And Sarah, thank you as well. Before I leave, I'll just apologize for my dark camera. Unfortunately, it's a laptop issue. I'm not hiding in the shadows. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.